guys, Ace here, and welcome to PHP tutorial number 18, if I'm correct. Today we're going to be looking at probably the hardest loop you'll ever encounter. I say hard, it's not really hard, it's just hard in comparison to the other two loops. And that loop is the for loop, okay? Now this loop operates, well, it operates pretty much the same, but it looks a fair bit different. But once you get your head around it, you can use it in so many different and cool ways, and it's really useful as well. Probably the most used loop in all languages that have the for loop, because it's so versatile, basically. But anyway, let's get a look at it ourselves. So basically, to make a for loop, you have to first type the keyword for, then two parentheses, and then there's three parts inside the parentheses. The first part is where you can declare and/or define any variables, okay? And if you, no matter whether you do or don't, you put the semicolon in there after that. Then you can set the condition for the for loop, which determines whether it continues iterating and whatnot, all that stuff. And then again after that you have to put in the semicolon. And the final part to the for loop is, you can set an action that the loop executes for every iteration of the loop. Okay. So let's look at probably the most common setup for a for loop, where we just type out for again. Oh, and after the function header, of course, it's just like all the other loops. You put the two curly braces, opening and closing, and then inside is the body of the loop. So anyway, back to this. You first type the keyword for, of course, then the two parentheses, then you can declare and/or define variables. So here we're declaring and defining in the first section. We're saying declare the variable I and set it equal to 0, and then we have to type in that semicolon, okay? Then we set the condition in here as well. We say, while I is less than 10, keep iterating. Then we have to put in that little semicolon again, and then finally we set the action we want the loop to execute for each iteration, which is just to increment I. So if you remember with the while loops, we were doing something like this. I plus 1 is not equal to 5. I won't declare, oh well, I'll do it anyway. I equals 1. And then we echoed out I. And then we incremented I as well. So like that. Basically, if we wanted to do something like this using a for loop, all we'd have to do is do this. I plus 1 is not equal to 5, and change that to 1 as well. Okay, so now we've got something. This loop will give exactly the same results as this loop, okay? So rather than declaring I outside the function, outside the loop, the loop header, we're declaring it inside the loop header in the first section, like the for loop allows us to. Same as the condition with the while loop and the for loop, it's inside the function header. The loop header. Damn, I keep doing that. And remember those two semicolons after each of those things. And then rather than incrementing the I variable inside the loop, we're just doing it in the function header. And so we've compacted what would take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down into 4 lines. And actually it could be 2 lines, but I'll explain that at the end of the tutorial. There's a cool little thing about the for loop. But yeah, I won't tell you now, but I'll leave that till later. So anyway, now we sort of understand how the for loops work. I'm just going to change this back. I is less than 10. Change that back to 0. So what should happen is it gets to the for loop, it says, okay, make the variable I and assign it to 0. And it will check the condition then after that it will say is I less than 10, and if it is, it will go ahead with the first iteration. Otherwise, it will skip to the ending, just after the closing curly brace. Just so you know, it doesn't execute the action for each iteration on the first iteration. It does that on the second iteration and every iteration after that. Okay, but not on the first. So it gets in, declares I, says is I less than 10, yep, so then it doesn't do this, it skips that the first time, and it goes into the body, and so here we're just going to echo out I, and then a line break. Then it gets to the closing curly brace, and it jumps back up, and it checks the, then it jumps back up, and it does the action then at that point. So now I is equal to 1, and then it checks if I is less than 10, echoes I, increments to 2, checks again, then echoes I, and so on. And so theoretically, we should get the numbers from 0 to 9 printed on their own line. Let's go ahead and check that. Just open up WAMP, start the WAMP server, open up WAMP homepage, and I'm going to click tutorials folder. And here you can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and simply, to make that a list from 1 to 10, which is probably more common, you just say, there we go. That didn't seem to do anything. I is equal to 1, well, whoops, sorry.